March 14th, the day after he begins his pontificate, Pope Francis returns to his hotel to personally pay his hotel bill and collect his luggage. March 28th, Pope Francis breaks with tradition, washes prisoners' feet in a youth detention center near Rome. July 8th, Pope Francis visits Italy's island of Lampedusa and meets with a group of 50 migrants, most of whom are young men from Somalia and Eritrea. July 29th, on the return flight from Brazil, Pope Francis gives his first papal news conference and sparks controversy by saying, "If a person is gay and seeks God and has goodwill, who am I to judge?" November 24th, Pope Francis publishes his first apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium, the joy of the gospel. February 22nd, Pope Francis holds his first papal consistory to appoint 19 new cardinals, including ones from countries in the developing world that have never previously been represented in the College of Cardinals, such as Haiti. March 22nd, Pope Francis creates the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. The commission works to protect the dignity of minors and vulnerable adults, such as the victims of sexual abuse. October 5th, the Synod on the Family begins. The bishops discuss a variety of concerns, including single-parent homes, cohabitation, homosexual adoption of children, and interreligious marriages. May 24th, to emphasize the Church's mission to combat global warming and care for the environment, Pope Francis publishes the encyclical Laudato Si, which urges people to take care of the environment and encourages political action to address climate problems. September 19th to 22nd, Pope Francis visits Cuba and meets with Fidel Castro in the first papal visit to the country since Pope John Paul II in 1998. December 8th, Pope Francis's Jubilee Year of Mercy begins. The year focuses on God's mercy and forgiveness and people's redemption from sin. March 19th, Pope Francis publishes the Apostolic Exhortation Amoris Laetitia, which discusses a wide variety of issues facing the modern family based on discussions from the two synods on the family. September 4th, the Pope canonizes Saint Teresa of Calcutta, who is also known as Mother Teresa. The saint, a nun from Albania, dedicated her life to missionary and charity work, primarily in India. May 12 to 13, in another papal trip, Francis travels to Fatima, Portugal, to visit the shrine of Our Lady of Fatima. May 13 marks the 100th anniversary of the first Marian apparition to 3 children in the city. November 19th, on the first ever World Day of the Poor, Pope Francis eats lunch with 4,000 poor and people in need in Rome. August 2nd, the Vatican formally revises number 2267 of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which concerns the death penalty. The previous text suggested the death penalty could be permissible in certain circumstances, but the revision states that the death penalty is inadmissible. February 4th, Pope Francis signs a joint document with Sheikh Ahmed Al Taib, the Grand Imam of Al-Aqsa in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, titled The Document of Human Fraternity for World Peace and Living Together. October 6th to 27th, the Church holds the Synod of Bishops for the Pan-Amazon region, which is also known as the Amazon Synod. The Synod is meant to present ways in which the Church can better evangelize the Amazon region, but leads to controversy when carved images of a pregnant Amazonian woman, referred to by the Pope as Pachamama, are used in several events and displayed in the Basilica near the Vatican. October 13th, St. John Henry Newman, an Anglican convert to Catholicism and a cardinal, is canonized by Pope Francis. Newman's writings inspired Catholic student associations and non-religious colleges and universities in the United States and other countries. March 15th, Pope Francis takes a walking pilgrimage in Rome to the Chapel of the Crucifix and prays for an end to the COVID-19 pandemic. The crucifix was carried through Rome during the plague of 1522. March 27th, Pope Francis gives an extraordinary Urbi et Orbi blessing in an empty and rain-covered St. Peter's Square, praying for the world during the coronavirus pandemic. March 5th to 8th, in his first papal trip since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, Pope Francis becomes the first pope to visit Iraq. On his trip, he signs a joint statement with Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani condemning extremism and promoting peace. July 4th, Pope Francis undergoes colon surgery for diverticulitis, a common condition in older people. July 16th, Pope Francis issues a motu proprio titled Traditionis Custodes. The document imposes heavy restrictions on the celebration of the traditional Latin Mass. March 19th, the Pope promulgates Predicate Evangelium, which reforms the Roman Curia. The reforms emphasize evangelization and establish more opportunities for the laity to be in leadership positions. May 5th, Pope Francis is seen in a wheelchair for the first time in public and begins to use one more frequently. March 29th to April 1st, Pope Francis is hospitalized for a respiratory infection. During his stay in Rome's Gemelli Hospital, he visits the pediatric cancer ward and baptizes a newborn baby. June 7th, the Vatican announces that Pope Francis will undergo abdominal surgery that afternoon under general anesthesia due to a hernia that is causing painful, recurring and worsening symptoms. October 4th to 29th, the Vatican hosts the first of two month-long global assemblies of the Synod on Synodality, initiated by Pope Francis in 2021 to enhance the communion, participation and mission of the Church. April 8th, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith releases Dignitas Infinita, Infinite Dignity, a document that reaffirms the Church's perennial opposition to abortion, euthanasia, and gender ideology. May 19th, Pope Francis appears on CBS's 60 Minutes in an interview with Norah O'Donnell, where he states categorically that women's ordination to the priesthood and the diaconate is off the table. June 14th, Pope Francis becomes the first pope to address the G7 summit in the southern Italian region Apulia. In his remarks, he stresses that human dignity requires that the decisions of artificial intelligence (AI) be under the control of human beings. September 2nd to 13th, Pope Francis embarks on a 12-day trip of more than 20,000 miles over 7 flights through Asia and Oceania. The trip to Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, East Timor and Singapore is his most ambitious international trip yet and the longest of his pontificate. October 2nd to 27th, the 3-year Synod on Synodality concludes with the final session in Rome and the adoption of the final report, which in a surprise move Pope Francis signs immediately, stating he will not issue a separate post-synodal document. December 24th, on Christmas Eve, Pope Francis opens the Holy Door at St. Peter's Basilica to officially launch the 2025 Jubilee Year of Hope. January 14th, Hope, Pope Francis' autobiography is released. The book marks the first time a pope has provided a first-person narration of the episodes that have marked his entire life, in this case from his childhood in Argentina in a family of Italian immigrants to becoming the successor of Saint Peter. February 14th, Pope Francis is hospitalized with bronchitis and later develops double pneumonia. March 13th, while still in Gemelli Hospital in Rome for treatment for respiratory illnesses, Pope Francis celebrates the 12th anniversary of his election to the papacy. 23rd March 2025, Pope Francis is released from hospital after 38 days of treatment. 20th April 2025, in his last public appearance on Easter Sunday, Pope Francis imparts the Easter Ubi et Obi blessing at St. Peter's Basilica. 21st April 2025, Cardinal Kevin Farrell announces Pope Francis died at 7:35 a.m. 22nd April 2025, Vatican has released the first photos of Pope Francis in his casket at Santa Marta. 23rd April 2025, Pope Francis's mortal remains are transferred from the Casa Santa Marta to St. Peter's Basilica. 23rd April 2025, Pope Francis's body lie in state at St. Peter's Basilica ahead of his weekend funeral. 25th April 2025, Pope Francis's casket was sealed during a private ceremony at St. Peter's Basilica. 26th April 2025, funeral mass for Pope Francis in St. Peter's Square presided over by Cardinal Ray. 26th April 2025, Pope Francis's coffin transported to the Papal Basilica of St. Mary Major and laid in a tomb. Eternal rest grant unto him, O Lord, and let perpetual light shine upon him.